Migration period artwork of the Germanic peoples during the migration period c. 300 to 900. It includes the migration art of the Germanic tribes on the continent, as well the start of the insular art or Hiberno-Saxon art of the Anglo-Saxon Celtic fusion in Britain and Ireland. Christina, Queen of Sweden, Gelasian sacramentary, gold work, and the new medium of manuscript illumination integrated barbarian animal-style decoration with late antique motifs and other contributions from as far as Syria or Ireland to constitute Merovingian art. Merovingian art is the art of the Merovingian dynasty of the Franks, which lasted from the 5th century to the 8th century in present-day France, Benelux, and a part of Germany. The Goths left the Black Sea region under pressure from the Huns. Jewelry-making traditions of Ukraine also influenced other cultures. For example, the Goths came to the area sometime before 400 CE and adopted some of the techniques prevalent in Ukraine, including polychrome and animal styles later reflected in the Merovingian style. These ornaments were introduced near the Black Sea and points further north. Another entry point for Celtic jewelry into the present-day territory of Ukraine, which was for trade and cultural contacts with northern tribes. Celtic art and culture spread into the British Isles, Germany, and the Baltic seacoast, and from there into Ukraine. By the 3rd century BCE, Celtic art began to penetrate into southern regions of Ukrainian territory. In Roman provinces, a renaissance of Celtic handicrafts took place, particularly in the form of jewelry. Greek art of the Black Sea region influenced the Sarmatian style. Most notably, it increased the color range. Together with precious metals and gems, glass is found in the jewelry of this time. Greek brooch fibulas were often made in this style. The Sarmatians conquered and then occupied the Scythian kingdom. This culture brought along new traditions, including polychrome style, an example of which is a process by which an image of an animal's body is covered with inserts of blue paste or turquoise in soldered mountings. Stylization of images developed into a realistic method of interpreting complicated zoomorphic compositions. The images of fantastic animals, griffins, sphinxes, winged animals, and beasts with human heads, were depicted in their works with a distinctive style, attracted Greeks as long ago as the Iron Age. Scythians, who had come from Iran and displaced the Sumerians, appeared in the territories around the Black Sea around 500 BCE. They prospered in the area for a long time and were trading partners with the Greeks. Fertile soils and a favorable climate along the Black Sea coast and the Dnieper River attracted Greeks as long ago as the Iron Age. In the 8th to 6th centuries BCE, the Sumerians brought new artistry to jewelry making. Made of bronze and iron, many of their pieces had floral and animal-based themes. The pieces included spiral armlets, rings, diadems, and necklaces from shells, copper tubes, and mother-of-pearl discs. In the Neolithic, the Trypillians in Ukraine made jewelry of naturally occurring metals such as copper. History of jewelry in Ukraine. Gemstones. Ukraine gemstones, including quartz, topaz, and beryl. Quartz includes rock crystal, Mauryan citrine, and smoky quartz topaz. Includes wine, blue, and polychrome bicolor varieties. Beryl includes aquamarine and Heliodor variety. Heliodor topaz mines. Freiburg and Breisgau, a beautiful city on the edge of the Black Forest. Prof telefonnu rozmovu z Justin Trudeau. Had a phone conversation with Justin Trudeau. www.x.com/Zelensky US/status/1831004286920032391. The Persian army fought their way to the Bosphorus, But Constantinople was protected by impenetrable walls and a strong navy, and Heraclius was able to avoid total defeat. Soon after, he initiated reforms to rebuild and strengthen the military. Indonesia warmly welcomes Pope Francis upon arriving in Jakarta, as he kicks off his 45th apostolic journey abroad to Asia and Oceania, marking the longest travel thus far of the papacy. Hashtag Popey in Indonesia, hashtag Popey in Asia. Read more. loom.ly/FTDB9ZQ. Moth Moon Magazine, X The High Tower. The Red Tour was everything. www.x.com/gifted-1831018252536999658. Giselle Bundchen for Chanel. FW 1999. www.x.com/virgosense/status/1831015672295444723. High Gothic. Flying buttress in High Gothic. The buttresses were nearly as tall as the building itself. Massive and meant to be seen, they were decorated with pinnacles. History of French High Gothic, a German High Gothic. What is the reason for Gothic buildings being tall? It is because they were deemed the pinnacle of architecture, and their verticality was to strive for closeness to God in heaven. What was the purpose of having a bell tower in Gothic churches? Did all Gothic churches have one? By the mid-1600s, many churches had bell towers of some form. They were used to call parishioners to church service, keep time, and to signal significant news.
The solar eye, lunar eye, sometimes equated with the red and white crown of Egypt. Respectively, texts treat the eye of Horus seemingly interchangeably with the eye of Ra, which in other contexts is an extension of the power of the sun god Ra and is often personified as a goddess. Which I love moon things cause my name means moon goddess among other reasons. Amulet from the tomb of Tutankhamun, 14th century BC, incorporating the eye of Horus beneath a disc and crescent symbol representing the moon. The eye symbol was also rendered as a hieroglyph. Egyptologists have long believed that hieroglyphs representing pieces of the symbol stand for fractions in ancient Egyptian mathematics, although this hypothesis has been challenged. It was one of the most common motifs for amulets, remaining in use from the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BC, to the Roman period, 30 BC, 641 AD. Pairs of Horus eyes were painted on coffins during the First Intermediate Period, circa 2181 to 2055 BC, and Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BC. The Eye of Horus symbol, a stylized eye with distinctive markings, was believed to have protective magical power and appeared frequently in ancient Egyptian art. According to Egyptian myth, Horus lost his left eye in a struggle with Seth, but Hathor magically restored it. This restoration came to symbolize the process of healing and making whole. In ancient Egypt, the Eye of Horus was an amulet that represented protection, healing, and wholeness. Dream/reality. The Black Death was a bubonic plague pandemic that occurred in Europe between 1346 and 1353. It was spread by fleas and through the air, and was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. 50 million. Some estimates say the Black Death killed as many as 50 million people, which could be around half of Europe's population at the time. 30 to 50% of Europe's population. Some estimates say the Black Death killed 30 to 50% of Europe's population in parts of the continent. Estimates of the number of people killed by the Black Death range from 20 to 50 million. Scotland. Stinson family 101 tartan products. Kilts, scarves, fabrics and more. Stinson is an English and Scottish surname. There are many variants, including Stevenson, Stevenson, and Steenson. The Stinson family first landed in Glasgow around the year 1100 from Denmark, changing their name of Stenson to anglicize it. Norman population in England, 8,000. This estimate covers the period from the formation of the Kingdom of Alba in the 10th century until the Black Death arrived in 1349. This is the last trace. Is the 10th. The population of Scotland in the 10th century is estimated to have grown from 500,000 to 1 million people, based on the amount of farmable land. Ireland's population in 2024 is estimated to be 5,089,478. According to official statistics, Scotland's population was projected to be 5.51 million. This is my Scottish/Irish side okay. The Persian army was made up of a small corps of standing troops, which were reinforced by mercenaries and levies when needed. The core of the Persian army was the 10,000 Immortals, an elite regiment of infantrymen who were constantly replenished when a man was killed. Modern scholars believe the Persian army was closer to 120,000 to 300,000 men. For example, Delbruck estimated the Persian army was 75,000, including supply personnel and non-combatants. Ancient sources claim the Persian army was between 2.5 and 4 million strong. For example, the poet Simonides claimed the army was 4 million, while Ctesias, based on Persian records, estimated the army was 800,000. Estimates of the size of the Persian army vary, with ancient sources claiming millions of soldiers, while modern scholars believe the number was closer to a few 100,000. Misty rain.
There are currently around 2,500 species of moth found in the UK, and only 59 species of butterfly. Of these 2,500 species of moth, very few like to eat your clothes. They are aptly named clothes moths, and they are rather snobbish, fussy creatures, and only eat fibers derived from animal sources such as wool. In Scottish folklore, moths don't feature as prominently as some other mythical creatures, but there are still a few interesting myths and legends surrounding them. One common myth is that moths are often seen as inferior to their daytime counterparts, butterflies. However, this is a misconception. Moths are incredibly diverse and beautiful in their own right. For example, the cinnabar moth, which is found across the UK, including Scotland, is known for its striking red and black coloration. Many of these Celtic gods and goddesses feature in mythology. Originally, Celtic mythology was passed down orally, but the stories were later written down largely by Christian scribes. The mythological cycle, which includes stories and poems about the godlike Tuatha Dé Danann, who inhabited the island of Tir na Nog. The Fianna cycle, which is all about the mythical hero Finn and his warriors, known as the Fianna. The King's cycle, which includes historical tales about previous kings of Ireland. Key Celtic deities you need to know about. The Celtic goddess Morrigan is the goddess of war. She's also sometimes known as Morrigu, or as the Queen of Demons, or the Phantom Queen. The Morrigan foretells doom or victory in battle, and usually appears as a crow when telling the fate of wars. It's believed that her appearance as a crow would either inspire or frighten warriors, leading them to their eventual fate in battle. Brigid. The Celtic goddess Brigid is the goddess of fire, healing, agriculture, prophecy, and poetry. It's said that she was much loved by poets, and she is considered to be a wise sage. Brigid is also a member of the Tuatha Dé Danann. Like Morrigan, she may be a Celtic triple goddess or more. Goddesses of threes, which represents fate and time. Luff, the Celtic god, is another member of the Tuatha Dé Danann and a warrior. As well as a skilled warrior, he's portrayed as a king, a savior, and a master craftsman. He's sometimes called Lamfada, which translates as long hand or long arm, and is likely to relate to his skill with a spear. He is also occasionally known as Samaldanac, translating to equally skilled in many arts. which highlights how he was a master of multiple disciplines. The Celtic goddess Danu is known as the mother of Irish gods. She is the mother goddess of the Tuatha Dé Danann. In fact, these supernatural beings take their name from Danu, as the name Tuatha Dé Danann translates to the peoples of the goddess Danu. Moth Moon Magazine, Scottish Legends. It's thought that she passed on her own wisdom to members of the Tuatha Dé Danann, as well as her creative and crafty talents. Gundestrup Cauldron, created between 200 BC and 300 AD, is thought to have a depiction of Tyrannis on the inner wall of cauldron on tile C. Tyrannis, also known in Irish mythology as Twirion, is a Celtic god of thunder who is easily recognizable by his sacred wheel, which stands for how quickly a storm could catch humans out. He's also known for wielding a thunderbolt as a weapon. Cernunnos, also known as the Horned One, is a powerful Celtic deity who is the lord of wild things. He is usually shown with antlers and is often seated in a cross-legged position. He's closely associated with stags, dogs, bulls, and horned serpents, and is almost always shown wearing a torque, a metal band which signified one's status in Celtic society. He is sometimes also shown holding a bag of coins and a cornucopia. The Celtic god Dagda is sometimes known as the good god. He's the god of the earth and the leader of the Tuatha Dé Danann. Dagda is portrayed as a father figure, as well as a king and a druid. Moth Moon Magazine, Scottish Legends. Rhiannon, the Celtic goddess, is a symbol of fertility, but she also stands for rest, communication, and leadership. Sometimes called the goddess of the moon, it's sometimes said that her name translates to divine queen of the fairies. Machu, the Celtic goddess, represents life, death, and war, and it's usually said that she's one of the Celtic triple goddesses associated with Morgan. She's also the goddess of the land and is commonly associated with horses. As a mother goddess, there are usually 3 parts associated with Machu: a maternal reproductive element, an agrarian element, and an element of sexual fertility. The Harp of Erin by Thomas Buchanan Reid. The area goddess is the goddess of Ireland itself. Reinforced domination of the Scottish nation, 1,500 earls, bishops, and burgesses, such as Stephen Stevenson, were required to sign a humiliating treaty of fealty, known as the Ragman Roll, because of the number of ribbons that dangled from the seals of the reluctant signatories. It was in July of that year that the Scots rose in armed revolt against the imperialist designs of the English king Edward I. But, living up to his reputation of Hammer of the Scots, he brought the entire nation under his subjugation little less than a month later. The Stinson, Scotland, history commonly depicted with a crown, denoting martyrdom for Christianity. The Scottish Stinsons, saints and sinners. The acorn, bleached of toxic acids and turned into meal, was a staple of the diet of most California native peoples. Myself, I was personally brought up on several gold mines and mined them as well as a little girl. Entrepreneurial roles. German settlers often established businesses and played a role in the developing California economy. Notable settlements. Sacramento was a prominent location where many German immigrants settled. Key points about early German Californians. Gold rush influx. The majority of early German settlers in California came during the Gold Rush era, around 1849, seeking fortune in the gold fields. Of German people to settle in California were likely those who arrived during the California Gold Rush in the mid-19th century, with many settling in areas like Sacramento, drawn by the opportunity to find gold. Notable names include Jacob Ripstein, J. H. Heilman, and George Z. Texas, Wendy-ish Heritage Museum, Texas, time travel. There are multiple matches for Wendy-ish, including a Slavic people and a language. A Slavic people. They are a Slavic ethnic group who have lived in the Lusatia region of eastern Germany for over 1,500 years. They are also known as Sorbs or Lusatian Serbs. Wend's language is closely related to Czech and Polish. Many Wends still speak it as their first language. A language. Wendish is also the name of the West Slavic language spoken by the Wen, a heritage in Texas. The Wends also settled in Texas in 1853, and their heritage is celebrated in the Texas Wendish Heritage Museum in Serbian. Adapted to the Texas climate, farming corn and raising cotton for cash. Also built a church in Serbian dedicated on Christmas Day, 1859. A Slavic people. They are a Slavic ethnic group who have lived in the Lusatia region of eastern Germany for over 1,500 years. They are also known as Sorbs or Lusatian Serbs. Wend's language is closely related to Czech and Polish. Many Wends still speak it as their first language. Or God of the winter sun, healing, survival, and the triumph of health over illness. Ipabog, god of the hunt. Jutherbog, Wendish moon god. Marzana is the Polish name for a Slavic goddess associated with death, winter, and nature. Divana, Zavana, Polish. Ziwana, less often Zivonia, is the goddess of wild nature, forests, hunting, and the moon worshipped by the Western Slavs. Their ghosts, and they solve mysteries dead boy detectives is now playing. Hungry and tired, the children begin to eat the house. When the door opens and the elderly woman that lives there emerges and takes the children inside, giving them delicious food to eat and soft beds to sleep in. What the children do not know is that their kind hostess is an evil witch who had built the bread house to lure them inside so she can cook and eat them. After they are once again abandoned, the children find that the birds have eaten the crumbs and they are lost in the woods. After 3 days of wandering, the children follow a dove to a clearing in the woods and discover a cottage with bread walls, a cake roof, and sugar window. The following morning, the children's stepmother gives them smaller pieces of bread before she and their father take them back into the woods. As the family treks, Hansel leaves a trail of breadcrumbs for him and Gretel to follow back home. However, Hansel attempts to gather more pebbles, but finds his stepmother has locked the door. The next day, the children's stepmother gives them small pieces of bread before she and their father take them into the woods. As the family walks deeper, Hansel leaves a trail of white pebbles. After their parents abandon them, the children stay in the woods until night falls, and the moonlight reveals the white pebbles shining in the dark. After the parents have gone to bed, Hansel sneaks out of the house and gathers as many shiny white pebbles as he can, then returns to his room, reassuring Gretel that God will not forsake them. When a famine settles over the land, the woodcutter's second wife tells him to take the children into the woods and leave them there to fend for themselves. Set in medieval Germany, Hansel and Gretel has been adapted into various media, including the opera Hansel und Gretel by Engelbert Humperdinck, which was first performed in 1893. However, Gretel saves her brother by pushing the witch into her own oven, killing her, and escaping with the witch's treasure. Gretel frees Hansel from the stable, and the pair discover boxes full of pearls and precious stones. Putting the jewels into their pockets, the children set off for home. A white duck, or swan in some versions, ferries them across an expanse of water, and at home they find only their father. His wife had died from an unknown cause. Gretel, sensing the witch's intent, pretends she does not understand what the witch means. Frustrated, the witch demonstrates, and Gretel instantly shoves her into the hot oven, slams and bolts the door shut, leaving the witch to burn to death. She prepares the oven for Hansel, but decides she is hungry enough to eat Gretel, too. She coaxes Gretel to the open oven and asks her to lean over in front of it to see if the fire is hot enough. The witch then tries to touch Hansel's finger to see how fat he has become, but he cleverly offers a thin bone he found in the cage. As the witch's eyes are too weak to notice from the dissection, she is fooled into thinking Hansel is still too thin for her to eat. After 4 weeks of this, the witch grows impatient and decides to eat Hansel anyway. The next morning, the witch locks Hansel in a stable and enslaves Gretel. The witch feeds Hansel regularly to fatten him up, but serves Gretel nothing but crab shells. Hansel and Gretel are siblings who are abandoned in a forest and fall into the hands of a witch who lives in a bread, cake, and sugar house. The witch, who has cannibalistic intentions, intends to fatten Hansel before eventually eating him. Hansel and Gretel. It's the premiere week for The Lord of the Rings. The Rings of Power only murders in the building and Terminator Zero. But there's still a whole host of streaming details to wade through.
The first known recorded story to feature a haunted house is often regarded by folklore scholars as Moth by the Roman author Plautus, which itself is believed to be an adaptation of a lost ghost story named Phosma written by the Athenian poet Philemon. Several centuries later, in the writings of Pliny the Younger, can be found the second oldest mention of a haunted house in which the philosopher Athenodorus helps lay the bones of a restless spirit to rest. Octavia the Younger, Latin. Octavia Minor, c. 66 BC, 11 BC, was the elder sister of the first Roman Emperor Augustus, known also as Octavian, the half-sister of Octavia the Elder, and the fourth wife of Mark Antony. She was also the great-grandmother of the Emperor Caligula and Empress Agrippina the Younger, maternal grandmother of the Emperor Claudius, and paternal great-grandmother and maternal great-great-grandmother of the Emperor Nero. The first recorded cases date back to the 1st century. Ghost lore is an intricate web of traditional beliefs and folklore surrounding ghosts and hauntings. The term ghost eludes a singular definition. Its meaning has evolving across cultures, shaped by various interpretations rooted in religious beliefs, folklore, and historical context. From benevolent spirits to malevolent entities, these stories reflect the fears, values, and traditions of societies throughout time. The first known recorded story to feature a haunted house is often regarded by folklore scholars as Mostellaria by the Roman author Plautus, which itself is believed to be an adaptation of a lost ghost story named Phosma written by the Athenian poet Philemon. Several centuries later, in the writings of Pliny the Younger, can be found the second oldest mention of a haunted house in which the philosopher Athenodorus helps lay the bones of a restless spirit to rest. These poltergeist occurrences, as well as spontaneous fires and different electrical issues such as flickering lights. I've encountered myself the poltergeist, it's accurate. Most claims or fictional descriptions of poltergeists show them as being capable of pinching, biting, hitting, and tripping people. They are also depicted as capable of the movement or levitation of objects such as furniture and cutlery, or noises such as knocking on doors. In German folklore and ghost lore, a poltergeist /poltergeist/ or /pltrgeist/ German Poltergeist, rumbling ghost or noisy spirit, is a type of ghost or spirit that is responsible for physical disturbances, such as loud noises and objects being moved or destroyed. The region's lack of rain during the growing season meant that agriculture was not a practical means of livelihood for early Californians, but the gentle climate and rich soil enabled these groups to live by skillfully harvesting and processing wild nuts and berries, and by capturing the fish that crowded the streams. The origins of ghost lore can be traced back to ancient beliefs in the afterlife and the existence of spirits. Many ancient cultures, such as the Egyptians and Greeks, believed in the concept of a soul and an afterlife. The Greeks, for example, believed that the soul would be judged after death and either sent to a peaceful afterlife or punished in the underworld. Athenodorus and the Ghost by Henry Justice. Athenodorus was born in Canana, near Tarsus in modern-day Turkey. His father was Sandon. He was a student of Posidonius of Rhodes and the teacher of Octavian, the future Caesar Augustus, at Apollonia. He was a personal friend of Strabo, from whom we derive some knowledge of his life. In 44 BC, he seems to have followed Octavian to Rome and continued mentoring him there. He is reputed there to have openly rebuked the emperor and to have instructed him to recite the alphabet before reacting in anger. Later, Athenodorus returned to Tarsus, where he was instrumental in expelling the government of Boethus and drafting a new constitution for the city, the result of which was a pro-Roman oligarchy. Athenodorus is also written of by Pliny the Younger, who tells us of Athenodorus renting of a haunted house in Athens. Athenodorus was wary because the house was exceptionally cheap for its size. When Athenodorus was writing a book of philosophy, late at night, a ghost is said to have come to him. The ghost, who was bound with chains, beckoned Athenodorus to follow him, but was allegedly indicated by Athenodorus to wait. After he finished his writing, the ghost led him to a courtyard and suddenly vanished. Athenodorus marked the spot, and the next day, with the permission of the city magistrates, he dug up the earth from that spot, where he found the skeleton of an old man, bound with chains. After the skeleton was given a proper burial with full honors, the ghost was said to have never haunted that house again. The legend corresponds to Arne Thompson Uther Tale Type 326A, Soul Released from Torment.